Vasquez driving you home every day. The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. Out Chicago and our other shows and interviews. Make your way over to heartlandsignal.com. The reason you hear a little chuckle in the back of my voice right now is, we made some little changes in the studio. So Henry and I are getting used to it and having some fun along the way with where cameras and microphones and monitors are. So, we didn't have a chance for our full dress rehearsal, but here we go. But yes, make your way over to heartlandsignal.com to get a chance to check out our articles and posts from our great digital platform. And one of the ones that I really, really like that you guys will like as well is Iowans really got after Marionette Miller Meeks. She was booed at a town hall for supporting what? Medicaid cuts. Republicans just keep being stinky and nasty. They just are. I mean, it's people were calling her a liar and booing her and as they should. It's maybe some of the House rules. If I ever get a chance to talk with Hakeem Jeffrey, next time I talk to Congresswoman Robin Kelly, I'm going to ask her, would it be, could you make a proposal that every House member has to do at least 2 town halls a quarter, something like that. I don't know what the actual number is, but there should be a requirement now, I think, that all House members have to do a town hall. And frankly, senators have to do a town hall as well, or more frequency with their town halls. I don't know. That's just me. But it's I think that's something that's got to happen, because what does happen is you get to hear about, like we have at our heartlandsignal.com platform, you get to see how people in the district are really feeling without the protection of, we're busy, we can't do this, we're fundraising, whatever the case may be. So that's going to be something that I'll ask Congresswoman Kelly. On our show today, we have 3 different guests. In the 6:30 hour, we have Sara Rohani, who is one of the attorneys for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We're going to be talking about something that's kind of quieted down, I guess, a little bit, you could say, given all that's going on with the shutdown and had been going on with that, all that's happening with benefits and all that's important. But this case, as it relates to voting rights, particularly out of Louisiana. So she and I are going to chat about that shortly in the 6:30 hour. And then Kathy Hempstead, who is one of the directors at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, will be with us in the 7 o'clock hour. And then author who's been with us before, Seth David Radwell. Talk about what it is to be an American right now. What does it mean? So those will be our guests today. That's who will be with us. Looking forward to chatting with each of the 3 of them. But right now, check this out, progressives.
It's very interesting that my colleague from Texas wanted to sit there and lecture both Catherine Clark and I, but couldn't see fit to ask us a single question, engage in a debate. Where y'all been, bro? You've been out for 7 weeks. You don't have the time to have a back and forth? We hear you rant for a few minutes, basically threaten to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and then don't want to defend that position? You should feel free to defend that position. You've done it 70 times. And if you think that's on the right side of the American people, then fine. That's your plan. Repeal and displace tens of millions of people. That's the Republican plan. And what I don't understand is why my colleague cut and run. I'm sitting right here. Catherine Clark is right here. Hopefully, Madam Chair, we can have a back and forth as opposed to just being lectured to by our Republican colleagues. It's very interesting that my colleague from Texas wanted to sit there and lecture both Catherine Clark and I, but couldn't see fit to ask us a single question, engage in a debate. Where y'all been, bro? You've been out for 7 weeks.
That is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. I love it. Where y'all been, bro? Where y'all been, bro? We're right here. He and Catherine Clark, and I like the relationship that Hakeem Jeffries has with Catherine Clark. They've been working closely together for a while, and they seem like a good team when it comes to, for lack of better words, playing the Republicans. She's had some great clips over the last few months. But what I like about that clip, in addition to the information that's inside of it, meaning that the Republicans, again, they hold. This is why I said earlier in the week, in response to the vote, and however people want to phrase it, Democrats caved, Democrats folded. However you're going to side with this, and wherever you're going to land with it, at the end of the day, the Republicans are the ones that have the numbers in the House and in the Senate. They brought us here. Trump brought us here. The GOP brought us here. The administration brought us here, not the Democrats. And Representative Melanie Stansbury, who's out of New Mexico, said a similar version of this in terms of what the House Republicans have done. It's not the Democrats that have done this. It's the House Republicans. That doesn't change, as I say so many times, the responsibilities of the Democrats to do their job. I'm not saying that. But in this case, that's where we are. And I like how Minority Leader Jeffries spoke directly to and about the fact that the Republicans, where have you been? He said, where you been, bro? But that actually could be the whole, where you been GOP statement that's relevant right now. Where you been all this time? Much of this could have been fixed after it was caused by the GOP, not by the Democrats. So what I want to say on this before we go to the break is that this is the kind of energy. I had lunch with a good friend yesterday, someone that you guys have heard their voice on this show before. So you get to guess who it was. You're probably not guessing. But anyhow, I had an opportunity to talk with someone yesterday that said, this is the energy. And this person is very, very clear. More of this is required. And specifically, we're talking about how Minority Leader Jeffries is just raising the bar. It seems as though he's caught his wind as well. He's caught his energy. He's caught his voice, whatever phrase is most appropriate. I think they all are fitting in this moment. That, we are done to having or allowing the Republicans to dump on us. We're going to keep calling you out. And that has to happen. I think months ago, Henry, I said that every single day there should be a Democratic elected official on a federal level calling out another Republican elected official every single day. Just next. That should be happening. So I'm hoping that Minority Leader Jeffries continues doing this. I'm hoping that he and Catherine Clark, Representative Clark, continue to do this. Because there's a whole bunch of material. It's like a comedian having looking into the well of how much material do they have to create and to tell great jokes and good comedy. Well, the Democrats can play comedian now because there's a whole lot of stuff that they can be talking about as it relates to what the Republicans have done to harm this country and what they have not done to help this country. So kudos to Leader Jeffries, and keep up that kind of energy, keep up that kind of unapologetic calling out the Republicans one by one and as a group, whatever you got to do. So we're going to take a quick break. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Thursday, November 27th. Hey, that's Thanksgiving Day. Tune to WCPT from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. for the Sports Cubicle Live Thanksgiving Extravaganza, where we'll be breaking down all the NFL games, touching on the hottest sports stories, discovering what Thanksgiving food is the best, and maybe a special guest or two. And with you. You can always call us at 773-763-9278. The Sports Cubicle Thanksgiving Extravaganza. Thanksgiving will never be the same.
The latest politics.
We both took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Global news.
We do know one thing. This tragedy would never have happened but for Russia's needless invasion of Ukraine.
And business updates.
These are banks that people rely on to get cash, and we need to make sure that they are protected.
And factual conversations. WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Yes, welcome back, guys. Thanks for being with us this morning. Let's give them a little bit of Choose Views news, Henry, on this November 13th, 2025. The Senate, as you guys know now, passes the funding bill that would end the shutdown, and we are at the precipice of that being done. The package would fund the government through January 30th, Departments of Agriculture, Veterans Affairs, and Congress itself. For all of 2026. And of course, this is going to end some of the gridlock as it affects the air traffic, food assistance, and economic data, which we need. Speaking of air traffic, there's still hundreds of flights that are being canceled. Mandated flight cancellations continued through yesterday, though they dropped about 3.5% of all scheduled flights. The lowest number was earlier in the week. So we will see hopefully we'll see some changes there as well, because we know that a lot of people are traveling, not just now, but will be for the next 40 to 60 days. Mortgage demand rises to its highest level in months. Mortgage applications to buy a home rose 6% last week, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, making the strongest demand since September. Volume was up more than 30% year over year. The increases came even as the average interest rate on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage ticked upwards from 6.31% to 6.34%. Higher interest rates did not seem to dent the recent financing activity and refinancing activity, though, with applications dropping 3% over the prior week. Unfortunately, there's a projected hiring slump as businesses are scaling back as we get into this holiday season. Seasonal job workers may have a harder time securing work this year. Businesses that typically beef up temporary staff ahead of the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday, including businesses like UPS, Target, and Macy's, aren't advertising how many holiday workers they intend to hire during this period of time. By one estimate, large companies have announced plans to hire 372,000 plus seasonal workers this year, compared to, and this is astonishing, Henry, 660,000 plus last year. That is crazy. All right, guys, just a couple of Choose Views news items on this November 13th, 2025. Leader Jeffries has been, like I said, vocal and unapologetic. And as I say, speaking from the bottom of his shoes. Here's another one from I'm casting forward. Minority Leader Jeffries.
We're talking about a multi-million-dollar slush fund that is in this bill for 8 Republican senators who apparently believe they're part of the House of Lords, because that's something that would be done if you think you're a lord, not someone who is subject to the rule of law. That's extraordinary to me. And unfortunately, it appears that despite how outrageous this provision is, my Republican colleagues are prepared to vote for it here before the Rules Committee and tomorrow on the House floor, while at the same period of time can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. It's shocking, and it speaks for itself, and the American people are going to reject. This is real-time corruption that's on full display. A multi-million-dollar slush fund for 8 Republican senators that every single House Republican is apparently prepared to sign off on. And if you vote for it, you own it.
There you go. So much is coming out about what's inside of this and what's been created and what the Republicans are voting on. And so, Congresswoman Kelly said yesterday that her feeling is that people are going to be in the right frame of mind and voting the right way when it comes to this. So, we just have to stay vigilant about pushing our elected officials to do what they've got to do. And I think that right now, that's probably the most important thing that we as individuals can do is stay vigilant about keeping them on point. Some good news. I think that everybody that pays attention to this craziness, and those that don't, but have been drawn into it, is that Representative, newly elected, voted by her constituents, Adelita Grijalva, is sworn into the House. But here's the best part of it: she makes a pledge, and there's audio to this that I wish we were able to pull together. She makes a pledge to force the Epstein disclosure. And overnight, so here's the little bit of the information in the article. Arizona Democratic Adelita Grijalva was sworn into the House Wednesday after a record 50-day wait, vowing to immediately join an effort to disclose files related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. So we will see what happens here. And, I'm not going to make any predictions because I know that the Republicans who are the majority in the House may try to come up with something that prevents that from happening in its real, unfolding. We'll see what happens. I hate to use those. We'll see what happens. We know who uses that phrase a lot, but we do in this moment kind of have to see what will happen. So I'm glad that I guess almost 800,000 constituents in her district in Arizona now have the representation that they voted for. And I'm also glad that the people that are going to be part of her staff and other folks there that are going to be able to get to work. And it's just really, it shows this is why I caution us every day that we have to take the perspective that we are going to be effectively critical of our Democratic elected officials on all levels, local, state, and federal. We're going to be critical of them with the purpose of moving them forward and helping them get better and do better, not just to criticize. Because tell me a Democratic speaker, and I know that there's some of you out there that know this, and I did my research and I haven't seen it, that took 50 days. 50 days. Now, I'm not talking about 5 days, so you can come back and say, yeah, well, there's a Democratic House speaker that didn't swear in somebody immediately. I'm not talking about 5 days based on time away and all the other factors. 50 days. It's a month, it's almost 2 months' time to not swear in a duly elected official over politics. It was nothing other than that, Mike Johnson. It was nothing other than over politics and protecting your big daddy, Donnie, Mr. Orange Menace. It was only about that. It was all those other things that he tried to throw out to the public that said that this was the reason why. It was all BS. You lied, you Christian faker. I was going to say something else. I didn't want to cause Henry to break his neck to hit the button. But you fake Christian. I'm going to call you that. If I saw you on the streets in Washington, if you were in Chicago, if he rolled into Chicago, Henry, and I saw Mike Johnson, I would call him a fake Christian. I would call him a liar because you lied to the American people. I'm not even going to break it down. You flat out lied. You came up with sort of reasons to dance around this, to buy some time so that Trump could figure out a way to have some comeback to buy some more time. That's all you did. And while you did that, people of the state of Arizona, which interestingly enough in the general election voted for Trump, but the people that voted for this representative didn't get what they were duly deserving of. All because you lied and you're weak. And the country saw that on full display. They saw you genuflecting to Donald Trump. They didn't see a person that's the leader of the House of Representatives, even your own party. Yeah, I'll take that back. You did lead your party, which is garbage, further down the garbage trail. That's what you did. And yeah, and I'm using schoolyard language to describe Mike Johnson, but that's what he deserves right now because he's not the leader of the House of Representatives. He's only the leader of his party, and they're acting like garbage. And as a result of them acting like garbage, the United States is in this turmoil, just like John Thune in the Senate. They're not leading. You know, they're placeholders for Donald Trump. And not swearing Ms. Grijalva in a timely fashion. And I'm willing to give him, 5 days, 7 days because of just the machinations of what goes on in Washington. Absolutely. I can do that. And I'm sure that if we go back and look at the data of other House speakers, that there was time where they needed to do whatever to get the person sworn in a couple additional days from the results of the election. I get all that in the special election situation. And for those of you who don't know, her father, Ms. Grijalva's father, was Rahul Grijalva, who passed away. So I understand that there may have been a need for some of the technical parts of this to sort of meet themselves out, but not 50 days. So your lies and BS have been exposed, and we know that, and we're going to continue to talk about that as it's part of the Republican way of operating right now. But I'm just happy that she's, been sworn in, she's in place, and not just for the politics behind it from the Democratic side. So let me be fair, meaning that the Democrats can now push with this vote to get this done in terms of the Epstein files. Not even going there. I'm just happy that she's sworn in because her people elected her. And they wanted a representative that could go to Washington and bring back the goods for that community. Ultimately, that's what they voted for. And now, hopefully, they're going to be able to get that. So at the end of the day, I'm trying not even to play politics. I'm calling out the Republicans for them acting like garbage. But ultimately, Ms. Grijalva being sworn in allows her people who voted for her to have the representation that they deserve. So kudos to her, and for her continuing to fight and push forward during this 50-day waiting period, and that now hopefully her people are going to get what they deserve in terms of the representation and leadership. So, all right. I wanted to make sure we talked about that because that's one we've been talking around for 50 days. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Check up on health with Chris Whitting.
Planning for healthcare costs as we age is daunting. Gal Wettstein is a senior research economist at Boston College.
For a 65-year-old today, over 80% will need some amount of long-term care. Now, a lot of that is going to be things like cooking, managing your budget, shopping, things like that. But then almost 1 in 5 will need what we call high-intensity care, which is assistance with at least 2 of the list of activities of daily living, which is walking, getting out of bed, using the bathroom, showering, getting dressed, things like that. Basic activities. So more than 2 of those, and we'll need that help for more than 3 years.
Professor Wettstein points out that the average cost of long-term care is substantial, with a semi-private nursing home room costing about $100,000 per year. With Checkup on Health, I'm Chris Whitting.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see mostly sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the west around 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then for tonight, partly cloudy, a low near 40. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 62 degrees. Saturday, mostly cloudy and a high around 66. Sunday, plenty of blue skies and sun, cooler, high 49. Monday, sunshine, high 48. That's your latest Chicago weather update.
Currently, it's 36.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today on Live, Local, and Progressive, Joan Esposito will be talking to Linda Lopez, award-winning journalist who has anchored and reported for ABC News and WCBS TV and News Radio 880. Joel Ostro, professor of political science at Benedictine University, and Rich Eberwein from Heartland Signal with 3 stories you might have missed. It's Joan Esposito, Live, Local, and Progressive, 2 to 5 Central here on WCPT, heartlandsignal.com, and tune in. And then tonight on Driving It Home, Patty Vasquez will be broadcasting live from the sold-out One AIM, Illinois 2025 fundraiser. Dan Schaefer will be the guest host for Patty during the 6 o'clock hour, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, weekdays 5 to 7 here on WCPT, Heartland Signal, tune in, YouTube, and Facebook. Tomorrow, Bill Zdenek, volunteer at the American Cancer Society, will be with us. Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics podcast, and immigration attorney Kate Lincoln Goldfinch, and CEO of the Lincoln Goldfinch Law Firm in Austin, will be joining us. And did you guys know that we have a contest? Yeah, John Fugelsang's new book, Separation of Church and Hate, is a New York Times bestseller. And to celebrate, John is hosting a book tour, pay-per-view comedy special recorded in D.C. on Saturday, November 15th. It's at 8 p.m. Central. Watch John on your computer, tablet, smartphone, or cast to your TV. If you go to MeetHook, that's MEET hook.live/John F., you can order the pay-per-view book package. Or if you're the second caller right now, at 773-763-9278, you'll win a stream code to watch the show live on demand. You can call again, 773-763-9278. Right now, second caller gets that streaming code. Contests running on WCPT 820 are open to listeners 18 or older and residents of the greater Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana area. 1 entry per person, 1 winner per household, void where prohibited by law. The listeners may only win or qualify to win once every 30 days. Complete rules are available on our website at WCPT.com by clicking the contest tab. Yes, you can. You can win. Man, I tell you, we got stuff happening here. And in that space, in that conversation, I said earlier, when talking about our next guest, or our first guest this morning, almost kind of fell under the radar with all that's happening with our federal government getting back open and SNAP benefits and all the rest. One of the conversations that I had leaned into a few weeks ago is a concern about voting rights and the Supreme Court case that's taking place, and some of the things that we all are mindful of when it comes to voting rights in the country. With us this morning is one of the big voices in this case that's taking place down in Louisiana. Sara Rohani, who is an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, is with us this morning. Good morning, Sara, and welcome to Choose Views on WCPT.
Good morning, Richard. It's great to be with you. You
too. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang with us this morning. And I think that a lot of people, this is been my observation for a long time. A lot of people, when they think about the NAACP, they don't understand the NAACP and its legal defense fund, but more specifically, they don't really know the history of the NAACP's legal defense fund and why it's there, how it was created, and some of the named people that have kind of run through your halls of leadership. Tell our audience a little bit about the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and a little bit about you and your background.
Yes, so the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was founded by Thurgood Marshall to really serve as the greatest legal voice fighting for racial justice in this country, which we are proud to have continued since its founding. And I am fortunate enough to work at the organization as one of the litigators focused on our redistricting efforts across the country. So I'm focused on our redistricting work statewide in Louisiana, at the local level, across the South, in Alabama and other states, and I'm, again, just incredibly proud to be continuing these efforts.
So, Sara, and just for people that didn't catch that, Thurgood Marshall, that's a name that maybe many people have forgotten. Legend Supreme Court justice, and paved the way for so many justices, particularly Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but also so many other attorneys. There are a lot of people that said that they went to law school and became an attorney because of Thurgood Marshall. And obviously people of color, but many other folks in general saw the work that he put in and the things that he did to change the direction of the country from a legal standpoint. And to say he was a giant is probably even still not appropriately depictive of his impact on our legal system in America. And I don't think that that's an overstatement at all. But Sara, I wanted to ask you a question that is, as it relates to how you guys function and how you work in terms of parts of the country. How do you, this is a word that may, I don't know if it's really appropriate, but it's the one that comes to mind. How do you guys divvy up and determine and select what's going to be what you actually litigate for and work in a defensive position for as a legal group?
Thank you, Richard. That's a great question. So LDF is not just comprised of litigators. We have incredible policy advocates, organizing staff that are on the ground with everyday Black Americans across the South and in other states. And so we speak with our partners. We know exactly what's impacting those populations and those people. And again, we attempt to begin with policy advocacy and encouraging, for example, in this case, the Louisiana State Legislature to pass a map that accurately reflected the Black Louisianian makeup in their country. And then as a backstop, once those efforts fail, we make sure to litigate these cases, not just voting rights cases, but economic justice cases. We're still actively involved in all of the desegregation cases that were brought originally in the 1960s and other efforts as well throughout the country.
So it really does. It comes down to where the legal prowess and leadership prowess, frankly, is needed the most, and also bringing into that the historical perspectives that may be taking place in that community to kind of determine what you're going to take on. And I know it's daunting, but you've got a great leadership team. I mean, the folks that are part of your group, Janai Nelson, just some named people that have been phenomenal in their representation of folks of color and other people that are on the unfortunate short end of the stick legally in different parts of the country. Tell us a little bit about your leadership team and the people that you work with and what makes you guys so effective.
Absolutely. So Janai Nelson, who actually argued this Louisiana redistricting case at the Supreme Court this past month, has just been an incredible academic, advocate, voting rights expert for decades, and recently took over the helm of the organization in 2022 from Sherilyn Ifill, who was the president and director counsel for several years prior. And I'm sure we also all not only know Janai Nelson's name, but as well know Sherilyn Ifill's name, as she's been absolutely integral to advocacy for Black Americans, political success, economic justice success throughout the country for decades. And as I mentioned earlier, as you very eloquently spoke about, from Justice Thurgood Marshall as the original president, director, counsel to today, we are just really fortunate to be able to continue both his voice and his leadership. And of course, we have incredible leaders at all of the levels throughout the organization, but really it's a phenomenal effort that's been led by Janai.
Yeah, it's for those of you who are listening to the show right now, anywhere in the country, you want to Google the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. You want to know more about the work that they're doing, because I'm telling you, LDF is, their work is not easy. The cases that they take on are complicated, they're layered, and they have some historical tinges to them that typically flow into the conversation around racism. And so the people that are part of the LDF are some pretty stout folks. And I tip my hat to you, Sara, for your hard work and then, of course, the leadership that you've been able to experience with Sherilyn and, of course, now with Janai. Just some great women that are stone cold killers, in my opinion, when it comes to this. This stuff. So let's talk about the case a little bit. Let's talk about what's going on in Louisiana and get into some of the nuts and bolts into why it's specifically important, but why it's broadly important to the rest of the country.
Absolutely. So this case has been a very long effort from really 2021 after the census was passed. So in the map that the Louisiana legislature passed back in 2021 barred Black Louisianians from having an equal opportunity to participate in the political process, which is in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and really the promise of fair democracy for all Americans. And the Legal Defense Fund successfully sued in 2022 in a case called Robinson versus Landry for the state's failure to provide that opportunity for Black voters. And in response to that litigation, unlike in what happened in Alabama, where the legislature continued to fight in the courts, Louisiana developed a map that both sought to remedy that Voting Rights Act violation while taking their own, political priorities into account. And they drew that map because a federal district court and 2 panels of the Fifth Circuit had unanimously recognized that that map that was passed likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So consistent with our history, in response to that new congressional map, a group of self-styled non-African-American plaintiffs challenged it and claimed that Louisiana used race in an impermissible way to draw that map. So unfortunately, a 3-judge federal court in a divided decision agreed with those plaintiffs, and both the Legal Defense Fund and the state of Louisiana appealed that decision, which then went directly to the Supreme Court. And so the court actually heard that oral argument back in March. And instead of issuing a decision in June, in a rare move, the court set that case for re-argument and then directed the parties to address a broader legal question. And, 2 years ago in Allen versus Milligan, the Supreme Court affirmed the constitutionality of Section 2, but then expanded their question presented in the supplemental briefing to ask whether or not the creation of this second majority Black district violated the Constitution. And so in their supplemental briefing, both the appellees and who were joined not only by the state of Louisiana, who had now switched sides and was no longer defending the map on this new question presented, but also the United States, really even greatly, expanded that question presented and manipulated the case into an all-out assault on the Voting Rights Act. So from numerous different theories and angles, they really no longer seek to just overturn Louisiana's map, but have pit critical civil rights protections against one another, and are effectively now claiming that attempting to address racial discrimination under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is itself discriminatory and violates the 14th and 15th Amendments, which are, the very constitutional provisions that were adopted in the wake of the Civil War to protect against racial discrimination in voting. And so, as you mentioned, the case is no longer about Louisiana, but is really about the future of minority representation across the country.
Well, thank you for that, first of all, Sarah. I said earlier that we'd probably get into the weeds a little bit because it's complicated in its nature in terms of how this case was brought, but then how this case is unfolded. So for all of the listeners, at the end of the day, what this is saying, and Sarah, I'm oversimplifying it for a reason, because then I'll hand it back to you to kind of add some texture to this. Basically, it's a situation where there's a feeling that white Americans are being discriminated against by laws that provide protection for discrimination against Black Americans or voters of color. That's a way oversimplification, Sarah, and I know that. And I know that you probably, when you're sitting sipping some coffee or tea, probably go, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. But help expand, if you can, on that and why it's such a huge concern that in some cases people are trying to just sweep under the rug, and the next thing you know, we turn around and this has been changed, starting with Louisiana, and now it's a national concern. So help us through that, my oversimplification of it.
Of course. So as we just talked about, the 14th and 15th Amendments were passed to prevent racial discrimination in voting. Those were the specific purposes of the 15th Amendment. And so now the argument on the other side is that those provisions are in and of themselves discriminatory, because Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was enacted in pursuant to those provisions, the purpose of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is to protect Black and minority voters whose votes are being diluted. So that can be through numerous ways, but in this specific context, it's through maps, and we're all familiar with all the redistricting that's going on, through maps that are drawn in a way that basically makes sure that the white majority consistently outvotes the black population because of the way those lines are drawn. So the black population in Louisiana was split among numerous other districts, but also packed into the previous majority black district, which was really central to around New Orleans. But as the white population had decreased in the state and the black population had increased, and every 10 years we redraw the lines, the new lines didn't reflect that. And so it really just precluded black Louisianians from being able to actually elect representatives that would represent the needs of their communities, which, as we know, impact day-to-day every aspect of day-to-day lives and include federal funding, which for a state like Louisiana, which is oftentimes hit with really horrible weather events and things that do require federal support, had a really significant impact. And so this statute, the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is often called the crown jewel of the civil rights movement, was designed to protect Americans, protect minority populations, and that has been manipulated and argued now in this case that is discriminatory, that attempting to remedy racial discrimination in voting, racial discrimination in these district lines is in and of itself discriminatory, which just turns the entire purpose of Section 2 on its head.
And it's incredibly dangerous because the reason that it's the crown. Well, let me back up. As I see it, the reason that it's the crown jewel is it's not just the voting and the impact of rights in the voting conversation, but for those who've been around long enough to understand the importance of the Civil Rights Act, yes, it was about empowering folks of color, black folks specifically at the time, and all the rest. But it's sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to rights for so many other Americans. The LGBTQ community has benefited from the Civil Rights Act. Women's rights have benefited from the Civil Rights Act. Years ago, I had a chance to see Maya Angelou speak, and she spoke about the fact that every move that we've made forward in our society in the previous 3 decades, and so when I saw her, this was back in the late or mid '90s. She said it's a child of the civil rights legislation, and so. The concern, and Sarah, I know you guys probably see this, is that this goes, and then Section 2 goes, then it gives any plaintiff that's indirectly or directly part of Project 2025 the ability to say, now we have precedent to go forward and take away rights of any other group because of this being removed. Am I off kilter, or am I somewhat in the ballpark?
I think that, I somewhat in the ballpark, I think is fair. Like you said, it's the crown jewel of the Civil Rights Act because it removed barriers to voting, which is the most base promise of this country for a huge population in this nation. And once seeing this protection, which has been applied faithfully by courts and respected by state legislatures for decades, it sends a really catastrophic message that these are no longer important. These types of legislation legislation and I suppose litigation that protect vulnerable communities throughout our country, LGBTQ communities throughout the country, can no longer be respected effectively.
Yeah, and that's the big concern. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We are talking to Assistant Counsel at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Sara Rohani. Sara, thank you so much again for being with us. And I know that predicting something is sometimes not the best course of action, but do you have any sense of where this is going to go? What are you feeling? And I know that's something that we can necessarily put into data, but what is your sense of where we are with this?
Of course, it's always very difficult to speculate or predict the tea leaves about what the Supreme Court may or may not do. But from oral argument, there's been a lot of headlines and discussion in advance of the argument about Section 2 being ruled unconstitutional in full. But I think at oral argument, we saw that there was an interest by many of the justices in what has been posed in the Solicitor General's brief in particular, which are what I would call really a wolf in sheep's clothing of recommendations to what's framed as clarify or modify the current legal framework that courts apply to determine Section 2 violations. And so those are small things like requiring state maps or the plaintiff's maps to perform as well as the state maps on certain metrics that would just render the test into really like a parchment promise. It would make it truly impossible for plaintiffs like our clients to bring these Section 2 cases under the guise of, maintaining Section 2 as constitutional. And I think that's something that's really important to note, that if there's multiple different avenues and recommendations that the court could take that, while don't lend themselves to a direct headline of Section 2 is unconstitutional, would really, similar in a way that the Brnovich case made with other Section 2 vote denial cases, make it impossible for Black plaintiffs and other minority voters throughout the country to bring these Section 2 cases.
And this is where I think a lot of regular folks get not confused, but just sort of stunted by how does this make its way to the Supreme Court? And a case like this that is a state, essentially a state filing or, a state jurisdiction, now is something that's decided by the Supreme Court when we have an administration that's saying things like we want to give the states more power. There seems to be this disconnect there, if that makes any sense what I'm saying.
No, I think that's completely correct. When this case first came up, Louisiana was defending their map and saying that, they have the political flexibility to draw the map as they want while remedying the Section 2 violation. And the Solicitor General under the past administration was actually on that side, in support of the map as well. But since there's been the administration change and the new supplemental question presented, it has just changed the entire nature of the argument. But at its first iteration, it was a very straightforward case about, whether the state was permitted to take their own political priorities into account while remedying a Section 2 violation. And both the nature of the case was changed in the question presented, as well as the new arguments by the Solicitor General and the state of Louisiana.
How does the nature of a case, it seems like it was so easily changed. I mean, how does that help us understand how that happens? I know it's complicated, but break that one down for us if you can.
That's absolutely a fantastic question. So, as I mentioned earlier, re-argument is very rare. It's an indication by the court that there were some questions that were left unanswered at the first argument, so they have a little more questions. They want to hear the parties come and argue again. And that's last time that happened was in Citizens United. It also happened in Roe and Brown versus Board of Education. Exactly.
Sorry, Sarah. Good going. I apologize.
No, that's exactly. There's so few that we're aware of them, and so the question that was raised by the court in its supplemental briefing was actually not raised by any of the parties at the district court level. It was raised for the first time by the other side in one paragraph of their merits brief, and as I think everyone knows, if something's not raised at the district court level, it can't really be taken up on appeal. But the Supreme Court expanded the question that was directly in front of it, wanted to hear more about a specific issue that was raised for the first time in the appellee's brief at the Supreme Court stage, and also in a unique twist that I don't believe has happened before, that experts have said has not happened before. They also pointed specifically to those pages in the opposing side's brief. So in Citizens United, they explicitly asked, should these laws be overturned? But here it was a different avenue that was taken that turned what was a racial gerrymandering case really into a case about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was not at issue in the first instance.
I was... I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I kind of got I think that I felt like Roe, Citizens United this was a similar, kind of in a similar lane of how this process itself through the states and then, obviously the Supreme Court. Sarah, there's so much more I could ask you about this, but in the limited time that we have, had today. I greatly appreciate it, and I know our listeners do, you breaking down something that's very complicated and nuanced, but more importantly, extraordinarily impactful on the entire country, because this, particularly when we look at Section 2, could impact the future of voting in the United States of America. So thank you so much for being with us this morning. How can folks, get involved, follow you, become more aware of what not only the Legal Defense Fund does, but the importance of it? How can they find you?
So everyone can follow the Legal Defense Fund on all social media. We're incredibly active. We always also elevate the voice of our local partners, which folks can get involved with donating, supporting in numerous different ways. And in your own communities, it's really just important whenever these redistricting efforts are happening across the state to make sure your voices are heard, to be able to speak to the state legislators about what's going on in your communities, and just make sure that to the extent possible, that the people can ensure that the state legislators respect their voices and the voices of their communities.
Staying involved. It sounds like what you're saying is getting involved and staying involved in local issues, state issues, because they are, in many cases, the foundation of some of the national issues, particularly when it comes to national concerns like voting and other civil rights concerns. Would that be a fair statement to make?
Indeed.
Absolutely. Sara Rohani, thank you so much for being with us this morning on Choose Views. You stay safe, because we know that you are out there fighting the good fight. We appreciate you being with us, and we'd love to have you back in the future to keep us up to date on what's happening with this case as well as Section 2. Sound good?
Thank you so much, Richard. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Have a great day, Sara. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Guys, get with the Legal Defense Fund, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, or Google Sara's name, Sara Rohani. Last name is spelled Rohani. Many of us who are concerned about what's happening with our voting and what's happening with redistricting, I mean, obviously, like I said earlier, it took a little bit of a, not a back seat, but with all that's going on with the government shutdown these last few weeks, we weren't talking about it a lot. So I'm thankful that she was able to be with us, because it's an incredibly important issue. And we, like Citizens United, in case you guys don't remember that case, that was one that kind of slipped through. And the next thing you know, money is speech. Money is, what was the phrase from Mitt Romney? And corporations are people. And so now we have all this money that's flooded elections across the board, and politicians on the left and the right, to be honest. And then, of course, Roe. People said, oh, no, they'll never take it away. And here we are. So pay attention to this, guys. And I'm going to do my best to keep you guys posted as well, and try to have Sara back and other folks from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Henry has signaled to me that Richard stopped talking. We have to take a break. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
WCPT Replay.
We are talking with retired Major General Randy Manner.
It's very important that you find these concepts of hope locally, because when it is absent from a higher level, for example, in this case, nationally, you have to look and find it, because there are these great leaders. I will tell you that I was absolutely inspired by the remarks of the governor of Illinois and the mayor of this great city when both of them gave that press conference. I was going, now those are leaders.
Yeah.
Those are people who are saying we are going to stand up for our people. In terms of the people who are listening to this now, if you live in Chicago or you live in Illinois, you should be proud of those leaders that you've elected to stand up for what is right.
Keep listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix and boom, you're missing a part. But it's okay, because whatever it is, it's on eBay, and it's guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love.
AP News, I'm Marcela Sanchez. President Trump signed a government spending bill ending the record 43-day shutdown. At the signing ceremony last night, Trump blamed Democrats for the shutdown.
This was an easy extension. but they didn't want to do it the easy way. They had to do it the hard way, and they look very bad, the Democrats do. So I just want to tell the American people, you should not forget this. When we come up to midterms and other things, don't forget what they've done to our country.
The House passed it on a mostly party line vote of 222 to 209. Speaking to reporters, House Speaker Mike Johnson says that, as promised, he swore in Arizona Democrat Adelita Grijalva as soon as House members returned to session.
She may not agree with me, but we follow the custom of the House on the timetable, and we've had a little, as we say in the Deep South, some intense fellowship about that.
Yes.
Okay, but she's here now, and I promised that we would have her the oath administered before we began legislative business, so she hasn't missed a vote.
Grijalva was sworn in as the newest member of Congress more than 7 weeks after she won a special election in Arizona to fill the House seat last held by her late father. Johnson did swear in 2 Republican members this year when the chamber was not in legislative session. In other news, a retired former NFL star facing an attempted murder charge has been released on bail. Correspondent Gethin Kulbal has more.
Former NFL star wide receiver Antonio Brown will be released on $25,000 bail and must wear a GPS ankle monitor on an attempted murder charge in Florida, a judge ordered Wednesday. The 37-year-old Brown has pleaded not guilty to the second-degree attempted murder charge, which carries a potential 15-year prison sentence and a fine up to $10,000 if he is convicted. His lawyer, Mark Eiglarsh, said Brown would return to his home in Broward County, Florida, while the case proceeds. Eiglarsh says Brown no longer has a passport. I'm Gethin Kulbal.
More information at apnews.com. This is AP News. AP's Lisa Dwyer reports on a new ruling on the immigration crackdown in Chicago.
A federal judge is signaling that hundreds of people arrested and detained in the Chicago area immigration crackdown could soon be released on bond while they await immigration hearings, and is ordering the full release of 13 detained individuals based on a 2022 consent decree outlining how U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement can make warrantless arrests. The judge also gave government attorneys a Friday deadline to comb through a list of 615 people detained at jails and federal facilities nationwide to see if they qualify for alternatives to detention, such as using an ankle monitor while their immigration cases proceed. A Justice Department attorney argued that there may be people on that larger list that pose a threat if released. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
And I'm Marcela Sanchez, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see mostly sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the west around 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then for tonight, partly cloudy, a low near 40. By Friday, sunshine, high of 62 degrees. Saturday, mostly cloudy and a high around 66. Sunday, plenty of blue skies and sun, cooler, high 49. Monday, sunshine, high 48. That's your latest Chicago weather update.
Currently, it's 36.
Taxes was feeling unwelcome. Now Taxes is an open door, literally, to new TurboTax stores. Meet our experts in person.
Hi, welcome in.
They're powered by smart tech and ready to do your taxes for you. Get real-time updates while you go about your day. Confident your taxes are done right. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. TurboTax stores opening soon. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app.
Chicago's progressive talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. As you all know, next, stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show. Remember that Stephanie follows me in the 8 o'clock hour here, Central Time, and of course across the country. And also the Choose Views featured interviews and full episodes podcasts are available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Search for Choose Views or visit our new podcast page at heartlandsignal.com/podcast. There you go. So one of the things that I want to give a couple quick shout outs and then we've got to get to our guest. Give a shout out to Mark in Florida, to 815, to Jim in Romeoville. As always, thanks you guys for sending us comments and observations. You guys send some great data. And I'll ask that you guys do me a tiny favor. When you send me a link or something that's got some data or charts to it, would you email it to me at richard@wcpt820.com? The reason I say that is it's important for me to read through it. And it's hard to do it real time on the air. I do my best to try to take a quick peek, and Henry and Devin sometimes scold me for not, for doing but to that end, if you guys could email it to me, it would be very helpful, because then I can go through it and pull out the value of it, the meat and substance of what you want me to be looking at and to be talking about. So that'll be hugely helpful to email me at richard@wcpt820, any of that sort of data, chart information and list and all that, because you guys know I'm a list person. It was so honored to have Sara Rohani on with us this morning. Today is a day of experts, if you will, and she is definitely leaning forward in the space of our legal system, but particularly when it comes to redistricting and Section 2 when it comes to voting. So follow her and get with her as best you can, and of course, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at large. We also, when we talk about policy and people that help us make decisions and provide us with better information, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is one of the nation's leaders in that space when it comes to policy, when it comes to things that make sense for our country. We've been debating over what's right when it comes to healthcare for a long time. And at the end of the day, I'm of the mindset that I want everybody to be covered. I want everybody to be protected and not wait and worry in terms of what they should do when there's a medical concern, preemptive, getting checkups, all those sorts of things. And with us this morning is one of the senior policy officers at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and that's Dr. Kathy Hempstead. So we're going to talk a little bit about health policy, talk a little about open enrollment. Good morning, Dr. Hempstead, and welcome to Choose Views on WCPT.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're with us, and I know that, like all of us, we're up early and doing what we got to do, but thank you so much for taking some time out to be with us. I know it's a little bit earlier for you on the East Coast, a little bit later, I should say, for you on the East Coast, but still I appreciate just a little bit of a
thing.
That only one cup of coffee rather than two, since we didn't drag you out of the bed. It's 5 o'clock this morning to talk about our healthcare system, Dr. Hempstead, in America right now, and the exasperating parts of it. And I said earlier, you heard me say this, we just cover everybody. It ain't that hard. Let's just cover everybody. It reduces the stress on us financially as a country. It reduces the stress on us medically as human beings. It's just, but we still work so doggone hard to get there. When to me, it's a pretty simple situation. But tell us a little bit about Dr. Hempstead. Tell us a little bit about your work, a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into a couple of quick questions that I want to ask you this morning.
Sure, yeah. And, your point of view is exactly ours at the foundation. We definitely believe that health is a right and that everybody has the right to live their healthiest life. And, what that means in this country is that people need to have access to affordable coverage. So we've always supported policy change that lead to increasing access to affordable coverage. And for a couple of years now, we've been moving in the right direction, and we've seen our uninsurance rate go down, and we've seen more people be covered. But we're doing a pretty major U-turn this year, unfortunately, between what's happened with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is going to have big consequences for people in the Medicaid program, and this, the failure to extend the enhanced premium tax credits, which are making the marketplace plans much less affordable. And sort of all in, the Congressional Budget Office anticipates that 15 million Americans will become uninsured over the next 10 years, which increases our uninsured population by, roughly 50%. So it's a huge setback.
It's a huge setback. It's also what's troubling for me, and I'm sure that you guys at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation talk about this often, is that it just doesn't make economic sense to have people uncovered medically, because at some point, if everybody's going to the emergency room at the 11th hour, no pun intended, for medical care, that's expensive as hell. And it's just not safe. It's not practical. It's not prudent. And that's the trouble that I have. And I know that, again, you guys probably sit back and just go, there's an easier route. And right now with the ACA is sort of our guardrail, but we know that's up for grabs in many ways when it comes to the subsidies. Talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When people lose their coverage, there's a whole cascade of really terrible consequences, as you mentioned, that are not just, that they will face the biggest consequences. And we absolutely know that losing coverage increases death and increases serious illness. And as you mentioned, people hold off seeking care sometimes till things can't be treated or till they have to be treated in a very high cost setting where they cost more, and you can't always get the result that you could have had if you went earlier. So there's enormous health consequences, and then there's huge financial consequences because people go into debt, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay for other things, maybe they can't pay their rent or buy groceries, etc. And so there's all these negative economic consequences for individuals and families, but also for communities, because that affects the economic health of the community. And we were able to do so many great studies when we expanded Medicaid to look at that in reverse and to see how communities did better, how people's health was better, how people had less bankruptcy, all these positive benefits from expanding coverage. And so unfortunately, we know exactly what's going to happen when we throw things into reverse and we see a lot of people lose coverage. We're going to have, the terrible health impacts, and then we're also going to have the ripple effects of the economic and, financial consequences for people and their neighbors, and also really bad impacts on the healthcare system, because when hospitals and doctors stop getting paid, they have to lay people off. They're not able to offer as many services, and they then sometimes will be asked to provide care for people that can't pay for it, and that puts more strain on them. And so in some places we may see hospitals close and see other kinds of consequences that will impact people that didn't lose their coverage. So it's a really, really bad development for, from both a social perspective and an economic perspective, and, addition to obviously a health perspective.
Yeah, and it just puts more, the word that popped into my head when you were talking about this is pressure. It just puts more pressure on an already, air balloon, overly inflated, problematic issue for us in this country. And so, relieving the pressure would seem to be the practical, prudent thing to do. But we just can't seem to get the right folks in place to make those things happen and make them stick. We have something that's helping with the Affordable Care Act. But as you so well stated, and we know where we are, these tax credits expiring at the end of the year are going to throw us in reverse. And that's hugely problematic. What are you, when it comes to information, this is one of the things that, a policy person, I always want to ask this question. When you're sitting and thinking and processing and looking at what's important, from an information delivery standpoint, how does someone like you and your team of experts look at delivering information to the general public when it comes to policy and what's going to be, digestible for people that are regular, everyday folks? How do you work through and process through that?
Well, one of the things that I think is really helpful is talking to people on shows and, people in the media. So I hope that one of the things that's helpful is this conversation and others like it. But we also try to put out a lot of data so people can see, this is what's going to happen to your premiums if you live in this congressional district, or if you live in this state, or if you're in this income, and this is the consequences of these policy changes. This is how much charity care is going to increase by state. So we run a lot of sort of analyses with our grantees, of what is going to be the consequence of these policies for people, and that's sort of the statistical part of it. But then we also do a lot of other projects where we'll find storytellers and create more of a narrative so that, we can tell the story of what does it really mean when people lose coverage. So we kind of, try to create a lot of factual information about what's going to happen to people, and then we also try to tell stories when we can, and we try to talk to as many people as we can so that people understand the consequences.
Yeah, that's storytelling, and I guess not to oversimplify, but oftentimes speaking in pictures and simple language is an easy way to get folks to understand. policy, and that can be very complicated. Talk a little bit about open enrollment right now. I know that we've been, all concerned about what's happening with Congress and as it relates to the ACA benefits and such.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about open enrollment, because we know that's going to end in January. Do I have it right? Or walk us through that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. Open enrollment started in November. It goes till January 15th. If you choose coverage before December 15th, then your coverage will start Jan 1. If you wait till January 15th, your coverage will start February 1st. And if you don't get coverage during that period, then you're going to have some kind of a special enrollment reason for a special enrollment period, which would be like changing jobs, getting married, moving, something like that. So, the ACA filled a really, really important gap. I think you kind of alluded to the fact that we have sort of a piecemeal system, or we have built a lot of different things around an employer model, which is certainly not the path that a lot of our, other nations have gone in, where they have more of a kind of a universal system. But in our country, we have this sort of piecemeal system where we have an employer market, and then we have Medicare, and then Medicaid, and then the VA, and then, this and that, and then the Affordable Care Act, which filled a really important gap because it allows people to get coverage who don't have an offer from an employer and are not eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. And that's actually a large and growing population of people who are freelancers or gig workers or starting their own business or own a small business or taking care of a relative so they have to leave work, or early retirees, what have you. This is a population that was 25 million people last year that actually chose a plan in the individual market. So it's a market that we need, because these people don't have another option. There's not another place for them to get coverage. And before the ACA, all they could get was like underwritten, sort of incomplete coverage that didn't necessarily meet their needs. And if they had health issues, it would be really prohibitively expensive. So now we have this standardized, subsidized marketplace that fills a really important gap, but it is not going to be as affordable as it was last year, because these enhanced premium tax credits that made the plans a lot more affordable are going away. So, I want your listeners to know this market is still there. It's still selling comprehensive coverage that's very much like employer coverage that will give people access to the care that they need, but they're going to have to pay more for that coverage. So that's kind of the nuance is to be disappointed that the tax credits were not extended, but yet not to want people to just sort of give up on that market, because it still does offer a really good product.
Yeah, and the product, that's the part that's important. We'll talk about that in a second. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu, and we're talking with Dr. Catherine Hempstead from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Senior Policy Advisor. Dr. Hempstead, one of the notes that I made is it was a question that actually has come from one of our listeners, and that is your thoughts about lowering Medicare age to 50, and then subsequently in subsequent years taking that age down. What are your thoughts there? If you agree, disagree, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's like one of a number of perfectly reasonable thoughts about how to kind of universalize some of the existing platforms that we already have. We have Medicare, we have Medicare Advantage, we have the Affordable Care Act, we have Medicaid. We have a number of sort of regulated, subsidized, organized insurance platforms, and I think it's a very reasonable question to say, why don't we just kind of make one or more of these platforms kind of the universal option, so that everybody has an affordable option in one of these spaces. And I think the idea of lowering the eligibility age for Medicare has been raised a lot of times. Certainly, there are people that oppose it, but I don't think it's an unreasonable idea. I think that the trick about Medicare is that, traditional Medicare is an indemnity program, really. It doesn't use managed care. It doesn't use network. So in that sense, it's very different than the rest of American healthcare, for better or worse. Some people would say there's definitely things that are good about it. There are definitely things that are challenging about it from sort of a cost control or utilization management perspective. So I think that that would be one of the things to kind of think through if you wanted to make Medicare or Medicare Advantage the sort of, universal platform. But I think that, the idea of migrating towards some kind of a universal platform would certainly make us more like other nations to which we compare ourselves, like Canada or the UK, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a conversation that you and I need a whole bunch of hours to talk about in terms of comparing with other countries and their healthcare systems. Which leads me to a question. You must be sort of acting in the savant nature. And my question that I wanted to ask you, where do we stack up? And I hope this is a fair question. Where do we stack up globally when it comes to that comparison of medical care, medical coverage? Here in the United States, how do you look at that? If you looked at it, I don't know how else to answer the question or ask the question, but just to say, how do we stack up?
Yeah, well, we spend a lot more, for sure. We spend a lot more on care. We don't get better outcomes, and it's hard to divide that between like the quality of healthcare versus a lot of behaviors that we might have in America that are not healthy. So, but in terms of life expectancy, stuff like that, we're not winning. We spend a lot of money, and we have a lot of people that are uninsured. So that's a difference between between other sort of countries in Europe or et cetera, that have kind of a similar like GDP or educational level. Have adopted a universal coverage system that and frankly they're not paying doctors and hospitals as much as we do in this country. So that's a battle to fight. But they're covering more people, and I think sometimes in those societies people might wait longer for care. It's not always like a happy wonderland every day in those countries. People get mad at their health system too, but they get mad about different things. What we get mad about in this country is that it's so incredibly expensive and it's so hard for people to stay covered. And there's a lot of really wasteful churn between different segments of the health insurance system that are really frustrating to people.
Is the expense part because of it being a for-profit system at its core, or do you see it differently?
It's not necessarily that it's for profit, because I think most people would say that, like especially in the hospital space, not for profit and for profit hospitals, there's not really any substantive difference between them. I mean, there are some sort of safety net hospitals, but in general, you really don't see a huge difference in a lot of the healthcare space based on for-profit status. But I think it's because it's fragmented and decentralized, and we have like a lot of individual contracts being made between insurers and providers, and there's no sort of universal source of any kind of cost control. There's no like price setting from the public sector, so a lot of prices are negotiated, and that's I think one of the reasons that we see differences in how much we spend for care. And it's not so much that we use more care in this country, and that's that's one of the interesting things. It's that the care costs more. And, we do pay more for drugs, but it's not just drugs. We also pay more for, for other kinds of care.
So the fragmentation part, what I wrote down is mass, and what that means to me, or what I wanted to remind myself to ask you about is, it seems as though if all these disparate parts were able to come together as it relates to our healthcare system, that we would be more effective in the delivery of it, which by result of that, we would end up having lower costs. I mean, I come at this from solve a business problem perspective as a person that's been in business for myself and understands that. But it seems like that massive energy of resources pulled together would allow us to be more effective. Is that somewhat true, or what you're somewhat saying?
I think most people that have thought about this a lot would agree with that. And we do see, like, in settings where the government's a big buyer, like traditional Medicare, we do see them setting rates, that reflect the fact that they're purchasing a lot of care, so they're setting rates. But then, what we then see in kind of the rest of the healthcare setting is then like, all the other rates are higher, So, and we see a lot of sort of individual, contracts being struck between providers and insurers all over the place. And, I think there are some really sincere efforts to increase price transparency in the hope that it would lead to less variation in prices and, more sort of unified lower prices. And, and I think I'm not ruling it out, but so far I don't think we've got too much to show for that, But I think there's a recognition that we have a system that is, despite the fact that it's sort of quote unquote more private sector, it doesn't really drive down to the lowest cost, in part because the decision making is very fragmented and decentralized.
Yeah, and that was the word I was looking at, is decentralized, because by us having that form of function, we've become kind of dysfunctional with the way in which our healthcare is delivered to the community. So much to talk about.
Yeah, and I think there is a recognition that a lot of people feel like the wheels are kind of falling off, I think, right now, because it's not just the problems with the ACA. I think we also are seeing a lot of folks in employer insurance really feeling like their health care is costing them too much, and then their out-of-pocket is too much. And we see a lot of medical debt among people that have insurance, and that's really something that should not be. So we have, I think we have the problem of not covering everybody, and then we have the problem of coverage costing too much.
And that's even starting to show signs, you're saying, in the employer-based plans as well.
Yeah, and this year in particular, it's open enrollment time also in at most workplaces, and there's a lot of really kind of hard news being delivered to people, and a lot of premium increases or more cost sharing being pushed to people, in the form of deductibles, copays, coinsurance, and very few people are satisfied with their healthcare, their relationship with healthcare.
Yeah. That would probably be the one of the most salient points that you've made today, and you've made a bunch of them. Dr. Catherine Hempstead, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I will beg you to come back again, because you're just, as much as it's hard to talk about this and it's a tough subject, I think you have done such a wonderful job of shedding the light on something that impacts all of us, whether directly or indirectly. So I hope that you'd be willing to come back and hang out with us again in the near future, maybe after the new year, once we get to past some of those dates with open enrollment. Does that sound okay?
Sure. Yeah, anytime. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being with us. Catherine Hempstead, Dr. Catherine Hempstead, Senior Policy Advisor from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Thanks for being with us. Have a great rest of the week, and we will talk with you soon, okay?
Excellent. You too. Thanks a bunch. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Guys, time for a break. 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR down in Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
This is Tony Moret. I'm an estate planning attorney who drafts living trusts and wills for my clients. You have probably heard my ads here on WCPT for the last few years. Your fellow listeners, when we have completed their plans, say, I wish I had done this sooner. It wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it would be. We can complete your estate plan within 30 days or less. There are certainly decisions that need to be made, but my 30-plus years of experience will help guide you through this process. There may never be a perfect time to start, but whenever I'm asked when is the best time, my answer is always the same. Now is the best time, while it is on your mind. Being able to tell your family that you have an estate plan in place, that all the details have been taken care of, will be a great relief to both yourself and those you care for the most. Our initial consultation is without charge, and there is no obligation. My phone number is 847-996-0496, and my website is moretlawoffice.com, spelled M-O-R-E-E. I look forward to speaking with you.
Hey, honey, what are you doing?
Studying for a math test.
You want some acupuncture? Acupuncture can help with tests?
Yeah, that was the subject of my published doctoral work. My research showed that one acupuncture treatment before a test improves memory by 9.5%.
That's almost a whole letter grade higher.
And it reduced procedural errors by 36%. That's all from one treatment. Additional treatments help more.
Wow, I want some of that.
I have patients who will come in before final exams, SATs, MCATs, and other tests. And we've seen this technique help older folks with things like dementia and Alzheimer's.
Can I get acupuncture too? I have a vocabulary test coming up.
Acupuncture can help remedy problems, but it can also help a healthy person perform even better. Come see us at Chicago Community Acupuncture at Milwaukee, Devon, and Nagel. Call us at 773-853-0920, 773-853-0920, or what's the website, girls?
Shikamaku.com.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago weather updates.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see mostly sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-50s. Winds out of the west around 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then for tonight, partly cloudy, a low near 40. By Friday, sunshine, a high of 62 degrees. Saturday, mostly cloudy and a high around 66. Sunday, plenty of blue skies and sun, cooler, high 49. Monday, sunshine, high 48. That's your latest Chicago weather update.
Currently, it's 35.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
This is Chew's Views with Richard Chew.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Great to have Professor Dr. Catherine Hempstead with us this morning from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. A couple of things just to keep in mind: the regular subsidies are not ending; it's the enhanced subsidies that are ending, and so. Just be mindful of that as we talk about it, and I try to do my best. So thanks to you guys for keeping me on my toes there, and we'll keep you posted as best we can as we go along with this. I mean, this is a critical issue right now. It was at the crux of the conversation around the government being reopened. So we're going to do our best to keep you guys informed. Right now, it's I guess one of the questions that comes my way a lot, and we don't always have an answer for it. We maybe have a response. That is, what is it to be an American? What defines being American right now? And a lot of people are, I think, are having some trouble, not trouble with that, but certainly some disconnect in that conversation. A few weeks ago, we had this wonderfully cool, smart dude on the show to talk about how America needs to heal and how America can go about healing when it comes to the conversation that what is it to be an American? What is it to be a patriot? And what are some of the things that we need to do to bridge some of the gaps that are out there? Who am I talking about? Seth David Radwell, best-selling author of this really challenging book. Title alone, but certainly when you start to get into it and look through some of it, American Schism, how the two Enlightenments hold the secret to healing our nation. Seth, good morning and welcome. I won't say good morning because I think from what I was told, you are not in the Central Time Zone or in the Eastern Time Zone right now. Good morning, Seth, and I should say good day to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's wonderful to be back with you. I love your show, so it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm currently in Europe because I'm giving a lecture at a French university. So that's why I'm a little bit overseas. But, the modern technology allows me to be with you.
Man, isn't that something? Remember when we were little guys and we would be watching the Jetsons or, whatever the show was, that we were watching growing up. And here we are. I mean, you're across the globe right now in one of my favorite cities and countries. I'm just going to say it unapologetically. And I'm here in Chicago, and we're talking about something that's important to our country, if not the world. So to take a moment just to remind folks, I always like to do that. A little bit about Seth, what's happening in your world right now, and then we'll get into some current conversation.
Sure. So I'm a businessman most of my career. I was CEO of many companies. And as we talked about last time, I left my career about 5 years ago because I was so concerned then about the way our public discourse had collapsed and how Americans were no longer talking to each other rationally most of the time. And that concerned me a lot. And I ended up doing a research project, which led to the book that you mentioned, American Schism. So what the research shows me is that there's a lot of commonality between our divisions today and our historical divisions. And we don't, it's like we're in a time bubble. We don't understand our own history. And we would have a lot of good ideas, good methods of overcoming today's problems if we let history be a guide.
Yeah. And sometimes I have a very, very good friend that's also hosts a show here on WCPT, Eric Grant. This show's a family meeting. And he said this over the years that it's really impactful. And that is this. It's understandable why some people don't want to talk about history, because sometimes that history is pretty awful. And because that history is pretty awful, and when he's talking about this, or when he's made this statement, Seth, he's putting that in the context of enslavement in America, where he said, there's a lot of people who are descendants of enslavers, and they don't want to talk about what their ancestors did because it's embarrassing and it's awful, and they recognize that. And so sometimes the gateway to talking about that, yes, in terms of enslavement and enslavers, is because a lot of people just don't want to talk about their history. That's intellectually and emotionally, that's understandable. However, it's the corridor to fixing the issue.
That's right.
Is that a fair?
That's fair. History can act as a salve for our wounds if only we'd apply it. So what I do now, the second part of your question was, what do I do now? I spend my time speaking to business executives and to students about how they can help heal the American schism based on my research that I found. So that's what I'd love to talk to you about today, a little bit about, and I'm thrilled to have a chance to, because your audience is going to be interested in this.
What are students saying? What's we got to learn from young folks as much as older folks have to learn from young folks as much as young folks have to learn from older folks. So what are students saying? What are you finding from that data?
Well, my overall message to them and to business folks is that the trajectory we're on is dangerous, and that if we don't change course, we are unlikely to have a democratic republic for the next generation. So I think we're in a very precarious space, and I explain that to them. Now, it's interesting that you ask what students ask. I'm abroad now. When I'm abroad now, many students are asking me, what's going on in America? they just don't understand, because we've always been, Richard, held up as such a model of self-government. So the Europeans are really confused when they see what's happening. I could go more into that. U.S. students, I just was at George Washington University, and U.S. students tend to be more directly interested in how we can move forward. And they've experienced some of the difficulties of addressing history, just as you mentioned, on campus as well.
So if let's come back to the comparison of U.S. students to non-U.S. students, and I know that. Are you saying that? Are you highlighting that when you're abroad more, or you help us understand sort of that those two silos? And I don't mean that in a negative way.
Sure. Well, what I think is the message of a lot of my research in my book is that when you look across history, and this is why it's important, you can actually always had division. And many times it's been worse than others. So it's not new. But what is interesting is that when you compare different eras, you see that there is a secret sauce. In other words, there's a formula for what we've used to move forward. And at times we've used this formula successfully, and at times we've abandoned it and had tremendous problems. I mean, as you mentioned, horrible things have happened, violence, et cetera, enslavement. So the key, I think this formula is very important. And it's like best practices, if you will. So that's what I try to convey specifically to U.S. students. And they're very interested in it.
So what would be what would be your determination as the most recent time where the formula that we have, or the history that, I'll just stick with the word formula because I don't want to mix
Sure.
the sauces just yet.
Okay.
But what would be the formula or the application of the formula most recently that got us to the next, that maybe some of your students can process?
Sure. So that's a great question. So I'm not going to go into what the formula is right away. I'm going to give you an analogy. In the 1880s and 90s in America, farmers all over the country were getting killed by the industrial age. So the big barons like steel, oil, railroads, they were taking over, and farmers couldn't compete. And so there was a bottom-up movement called the Farmers Alliance, which was a populist movement that was furious at the elites. So sound familiar?
Yeah.
And the Farmers Alliance advocated for real change. And in fact, to make a long story short, it didn't happen right away, although just to having a bottom-up movement was important because it taught farmers how to buy together and have more power. But it led to ultimately out of the Gilded Age into the Progressive Era. In the 1920s. So it led to a lot of change, but it took a while. I think that epic of history is very analogous to today, where our economic model of the last 40 years has worked very well for some Americans, but for 100 million Americans or more, it's left them behind. It's really treated them unfairly. And we, just like in the Gilded Age, and so we have to figure out how to do better. And that's why that analogy is so important.
So if we've abandoned, as you've said, in some ways, our use of the secret sauces, and right. there's a few of them, and I guess per category, as you've defined it, and this is why, folks, you guys have got to get his book. There are sauces that are applied to different problems, and so talk a little bit about that, because it sounds like in many ways you feel like we've abandoned not only the use of the sauces, but even the awareness that they exist in the first place.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And for me, there is, in fact, one primary magic formula. And I'll tell you what it is. And your listeners will understand when I say it's abandoned. The first, it has 3 elements, so it's fairly easy. I mean, I'm going to simplify this, of course, so we can talk about it on the radio. I love this in your show. The first part of the formula is using empirical data. That, in fact, there is a search for truth that has meant something. And when we're solving a problem, using data is important. Everybody can't have their own facts. So data has to be at the center of the problem solving. That's number one. Should I go on?
No, you please. Go on.
And so an empirical environment where we really are problem solving using verified data, 1. 2, I call empathetic listening, but it means understanding other points of view in a deep way where you've gotten into someone else's shoes and walked around for a while. It's the type of listening we used to do when I was in high school in debate club, where you'd have to make an argument and get all your facts straight, and then you'd be assigned to make the opposite argument and do that. So this is not about listening to someone on Twitter. This is not what we do today. In fact, everyone's screaming so much that no one's even listening and really comprehending. And so the second part of the sauce is a willingness and a curiosity to really listen and comprehend points of view different from your own.
Okay. The empathetic listening part, I literally said, slow your brain down for a moment, Richard, because you have to listen to the import of what he's saying about listening. And when you said, and I knew I had a pretty good idea where you were going to go about debate, because that's yes, I remember that strongly, and it's one of the lost arts, I believe, that right now. And I'm not going to try to say why, or not why, but where it came from. I have my suspicions. I know you have yours based on your research. But as a business person solving problems, I think one of the most important things that we can do is to position ourselves on the other side of the conversation. And I used to, as a financial advisor, I always have thought about it this way. What is it that the client is going to want from me that's going to help them solve their problem? So the only way I can figure that out, or even to try to address it, to then try to figure it out, is to put myself into their seat and go, okay, what would I want this financial advisor to talk to me about to then get me down the path toward a solution? So it has really helped me, and in my days in the past as an advisor, to do that. And it's also helped me here with the show, which is What is it that Seth is trying to say to us to help us get into a better position when it comes to communicating with each other?
Right. So that's the second one, Richard. And the third one is, in any problem-solving situation, going into the room to solve a problem, you understand from the start that you will not get everything you want, that compromise is very important, and that if you're not willing to compromise, you're not going to get very far because there's different points of view. I say sometimes we can't let perfection be the enemy of the good.
Man.
Now, those three things.
I love that phrase. I'm sorry.
Sound simple.
I'm sorry, Seth. Please say that again, because please say that again.
So everybody today seems like they won't compromise. They're driving towards what they think is right. And I'm saying the third part of the secret sauce is a willingness to compromise. That if you're trying to get to perfection, you're not going to get anything done. So perfection cannot be don't let perfection be the enemy of the good.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
That's the third part. Now, what's interesting about those three parts of the formula, of course, I'm simplifying, Richard, but I think I'm trying to make it easy for the radio for your listeners to understand, is I think business leaders use those three things all the time to make their businesses work. And that's why they're successful. Now, what I would ask you and your listeners is, do we think those three things are happening in the public debate today?
All three at the same time? No, I would, numbers 2 and 3 may be in part happening, or there might be pieces of that where there's some compromise or there's some conversation toward a better end. And there's some, I feel your pain, part of the empathetic listening. But the thing that I think stands out for me that's not happening right now is the data, the empirical data. I would say, if you said, Richard, you got to pick one of those three that's not happening right now in conversation and debate, politically, socially, I would say data is the one that's not happening.
Right. Correct. I think that's not happening, but I would argue strongly that the other two are also not happening most of the time. Of course, this show is an exception because we're talking to each other respectfully, and that's what we need more of. But what I'm talking about is, if you ask anybody, under 30 where they get information, they say, on TikTok or Twitter, or not called X. So there's not enough people willing to understand other points of view or compromise. And would we say that our elected leaders are examples of this? I mean, to me, they're examples of not doing any of these three things. And I can show you over the course of history that these three, we wouldn't have gotten to a constitution with all its flaws if we didn't at least do these three things. And I could also explain with your listeners, maybe on another time, is if you take an issue that's so emotional today, like immigration, you can actually look at data that show you where immigration in our history has been helpful and where it's been difficult. And there's real data on that. Mm-hmm. And, we can't have no immigration, and we can't have open borders either. The two extremes that are not willing to compromise will get us nowhere.
Yep.
We need a structured immigration reform plan that takes both points of view into account, many points of view. And, so that even something as difficult as that, I believe we can, if we use the secret sauce more, we'd make more progress.
Without a doubt. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We're talking to Seth David Radwell, who is it's become my new buddy when it comes to this conversation around how we communicate and how we connect with each other, and understanding a couple of things. We have a lot more in common than we have apart. And if we allow history to be a teacher, we can learn something. And so it's great to have you with us again, Seth. And I'm really proud to have this conversation. What you said a moment ago about there's some things that we just don't use the secret sauce with. I would dare say that these three right here, data, empathetic listening, and compromise, there isn't a place in life that they don't have an application. Just those three right there, on a one-on-one conversation with one of your buddies in the neighborhood, or getting on a plane when there's an issue with getting on a plane, and when there's a problem there. All three of these play into that. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Look, but it's amazing to me when you think of this. They should become kind of natural parts of our repertoire to go through our day and get things done. But increasingly, I think, Richard, is people are abandoning them. They're sticking with people who are in their bubble, who think like them. They're not understanding other points of view. Remember, I said in number 2, deep empathetic listening. It's willing to listen to points of view different from your own. So I think even though they sound simple, I think that a combination of the incentives in, let's say, a lot of online media is not to do those things. It's to get clicks and eyeballs, which is about sensationalism. It doesn't really care much about truth or listening or compromise. So our different parts of our society have given incentives to not use those things. And that's what's happening, I think, especially young people, I dare say.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a component to that for all. I mean, and I know you know this for all generations, but unfortunately, I think for younger people, chronologically, the exposure is at such a higher rate, and the utilization and dependence on certain forms of information is so much more intense than it was for you and me when we were coming along. And that's not a knock on younger folks. It's really more of just a realization to what they're exposed to versus what you and I were exposed to 40, 50 years ago. And
because when we grew up, Richard, there was something called the fairness doctrine in media. Right? Do you remember that?
Oh, God, yeah.
That was banned in the Reagan administration.
Thank you.
So you and I listened to people like Walter Cronkite or shows that really, we don't have any news and TV anymore.
Yeah, it's
this
entertainment.
Is a great discussion.
It's entertainment in many cases. I'm sorry, Seth.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We agree. So why don't we have a social media platform, for example, where everyone who uses it needs to be authenticated as a real person.
Man.
We authenticate people all the time for things in society. To drive, you need a license.
Yep.
So if we had a platform where the bots are gone and you knew who people were and they had to take responsibility for what they post, I think that would be helpful.
It would actually here's the thing, going back to, and for those who were chronologically younger, going, okay, here are two old guys going back what it used to be like. But there's value in that, because what did you say at the beginning? That's about our history. And the learning that comes from going, yeah, that did work particularly well is of import right now. But I want to, as we come to the end, and this just once again says, we have to have you on again, and we have to talk about this again. But I want to make sure that we come back to something that you just said about if there were for lack of better words, a verification system as it relates to on social media. I think what that would do is it would improve the brand. It would improve what people are seeing, hearing, reading, and it would force all of us to be a little bit more diligent about two things: what we look at, and then what we put out.
Absolutely. And that's we could have anonymous platforms for people who want to be entertained, but we need some space where there's an authenticated platform where people who post, if you're going to post information, you take responsibility for it as a person. That's a key missing part of the internet today. And of course, it's wonderful in some ways, because when you're anonymous, you can rage and rant and you can do whatever you want. But we have to have a space where there's rational, respectful dialogue.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of having that. It raises, I won't say raises the standard, but maybe we can use that. It raises the standard, raises the expectation, and then it raises the outcome, the end result, the end product. That well-edited magazine or newspaper, when it hit the stands, for the most part, it was pretty much bulletproof in terms of the accuracy, because a lot of the people on the publishing side, and I'm talking about print media, were worried about, I don't want to get sued because we said something that was inaccurate, patently inaccurate. And so where we are today is far from that. And I think that if we had that authentication part, and it's a big, that's what we're built that way, to have big dreams and big wishes for something like that. And I think we need it, because it would then, going back to the thing about history and data, it would go, well, wait a minute, that isn't right. That's just flat out. The data doesn't support that. And historical data particularly says, that's not right, dude.
Right. So. Well, I know we have to wrap up, Richard, but one of the interesting things to look at is the whole rise of journalism in the 1920s was really created as a profession to get to have at the center of the value the pursuit of truth. And journalists were trained in print and elsewhere to do this. They were on a local beat in a local newspaper, and they had to chase down all the information and do the three things I just said. So let's not forget that we've built journalism for a reason.
And it's to have that act, running down a beat, running down a lead, making sure that it was verified a couple different ways. I can't call the name of the movie, but help me out with this, Seth, as we wrap up. It's about the Washington Post, and
Yes, I know.
It was out just a couple years ago. I can't think of the name, and I know somebody's probably going to send me a text. But if we want to have a good idea of what Seth is talking about, go watch this movie, which it's about the Washington Post, and I'm drawing a blank on it, and you know what I'm talking about. It's a great example of getting to the story, getting to the accuracy, making sure that things are spot on, and go watch All the President's Men. The Post, yeah. I guess it was called The Post, yeah. Go watch The Post and go watch All the President's Men, about getting it right and really knowing that they had the information correct before they went to print. So anyhow,
I know we have to wrap up. So you tell me. I'd love to come back when you can.
Let's do this again next month. I think that right now there needs to be more conversation where folks can connect and get along, because we don't have that globally in the U.S. and globally throughout the rest of the world, frankly. So I'd love to have you back, and we'll make that happen sometime again in December. Seth David Radwell, the author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments hold the secret to healing our nation. And I'd frankly go as far as saying healing our world. Seth, it's a pleasure, brother, to be with you, and thank you so much. Go teach some kids something new over there.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I look forward to coming back, Richard.
All right, man. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Guys, thanks for being with us this morning, and I hope I didn't make anybody too crazy. Thanks for Seth hanging out with us this morning, and thanks for Dr. Hempstead for being with us. It was really a pleasure to have both of them with us this morning, and I'm always, just humbled by the people that decide to hang out with us on the show. And we cannot forget Sara Rohani, who is one of the legal minds at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So check all three of them out. Check out Seth, check out Dr. Hempstead, and check out Sara Rohani. And always, guys, stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show. And remember, take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.
When it comes to the vitamins and supplements you take, quality counts. If you have questions or concerns about the vitamins you plan on taking, we're happy to help. Mark Drugs, better health and care for you and your pets. The most common signs you need a probiotic are if you have taken an antibiotic and need to balance out the gut bacteria, you find yourself getting constantly sick, or you feel bloated, unwell, or have skin issues. We carry high-quality probiotics at our pharmacy, such as Florastor, Floragen, and what I refer to as the silver bullet, Orthobiotic, which combines multiple strains of beneficial bacteria and friendly yeast to stimulate optimal gut flora. Get to know your pharmacist. Caring for you, your family, and your overall well-being is what our pharmacists at Mark Drugs stand for. You have a choice when it comes to your health care, and a great choice is Mark Drugs in Roselle and Deerfield, where you get better health and care for you and your pets. Check out markdrugs.com for the pet of the month.
That's the sound of the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program, saving you money and energy. With rebates on Energy Star appliances, so you can come back to a home full of savings. Discover more ways to save at ComEd.com/home savings. ComEd, powering lives.
At Bank of America, we're proud that more than 20,000 veterans and people with military backgrounds have joined our ranks since 2015. Now we're